The crystal chandelier flickered once, twice, then plunged the entire ballroom into darkness. 500 of the city's most powerful people gasped in unison as their elegant charity gala suddenly turned into chaos. Designer gowns rustled in the blackness, champagne glasses clinked nervously, and whispered complaints filled the air. But then, from somewhere near the service entrance, came the steady beam of a small flashlight and the quiet voice of someone who didn't belong there at all. "I can fix this," said Danny Morrison, the night janitor, as he made his way through the crowd of millionaires and socialites. His worn work boots squeaked against the marble floor, and his faded uniform stood out like a stain against all that silk and satin. The guests parted reluctantly, some covering their noses as if poverty itself had an odor. Danny had been mopping these same floors for 3 years, invisible to everyone who mattered. But tonight, the darkness made him the only one who could see. The billionaire tech mogul Vincent Hayes, hosting this $2 million fundraiser for children's education, watched from the head table as this unremarkable man disappeared behind the heavy velvet curtains where the electrical panels lived. Hayes had built his empire on solutions, on finding answers when others saw only problems. Something about the janitor's quiet confidence in that moment of chaos caught his attention in a way that would change everything. But to understand how Danny Morrison ended up holding the key to more than just the building's power grid, we have to go back to where his story really began. 3 months earlier, Danny had been rushing through his morning routine in their tiny apartment, trying to get his 8-year-old son Tommy ready for school while juggling his day job as a maintenance worker at the community center. The morning light filtered through their cracked window, illuminating a home held together by love rather than money. Photos of Danny's late wife Sarah covered every surface, her warm smile watching over them like a guardian angel who'd left too soon. "Dad, my science project is due today," Tommy announced over his bowl of generic cereal, his voice carrying that particular mixture of excitement and worry that only children could master. Danny's stomach dropped. Between working 16-hour days to keep them afloat and the exhaustion that came with grief, he'd completely forgotten about the solar system model Tommy had been talking about for weeks. "Buddy, I'm so sorry. I know we planned to work on it together." Tommy's face fell for just a moment before he forced a smile that broke Danny's heart. "It's okay, Dad. I know you're working hard for us." That afternoon, while cleaning the community center science room, Danny found himself surrounded by art supplies and educational materials that cost more than his monthly rent. His fingers traced the outline of a poster about electrical circuits, remembering how Sarah used to help Tommy with his homework every night, her patient voice explaining concepts that Danny barely understood himself. She'd been the smart one, the one with the college degree and the dreams. Danny had just been the guy who could fix anything with his hands. But as he stood there in that empty classroom, an idea began to form. Danny had been working with electrical systems since he was Tommy's age, learning from his father who'd been an electrician before the factory jobs dried up. Maybe he didn't have Sarah's education, but he had something else. He had skills that could light up the world. That night, Danny and Tommy stayed up until past midnight, building a solar system that glowed with tiny LED lights powered by a simple circuit Danny had wired himself. Tommy's eyes grew wide with wonder as each planet illuminated in sequence, and for the first time since Sarah's death, Danny felt like he might actually be enough. "Dad, how do you know how to make electricity?" Tommy asked, his small fingers tracing the copper wires that brought their project to life. "Your mom always said I had magic in my hands," Danny whispered, remembering Sarah's words from their early days together when she'd watch him fix broken appliances in their first apartment. I guess she was right. The science fair project earned Tommy first place and a scholarship to the city's advanced STEM camp, but more importantly, it reminded Danny of something he'd forgotten in his grief. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was creating light in the darkness. Which is exactly what he was doing now, 3 months later, as the Charity Gala's backup generator hummed to life and emergency lighting began to flicker throughout the ballroom. Danny emerged from behind the curtains, his work shirt now stained with grease, his hands dirty but steady. The crowd began to murmur with relief as the main lights slowly returned, each chandelier blooming back to life like electric flowers. Vincent Hayes watched this transformation with the calculating gaze of a man who'd built his fortune on recognizing talent wherever it hid. He'd seen million-dollar presentations fail and billion-dollar deals collapse, but he'd rarely witnessed such quiet competence in the face of crisis. As the janitor packed up his tools and prepared to disappear back into invisibility, Hayes made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. "Excuse me," Hayes called out, his voice carrying across the now illuminated ballroom. "The gentleman who just restored our power, could you join me for a moment?" Every head in the room turned to stare at Danny, whose face flushed red under the sudden attention. He'd spent years perfecting the art of being invisible, and now hundreds of the city's most influential people were looking directly at him. His first instinct was to run, to fade back into the shadows where people like him belonged. But then he thought of Tommy, probably fast asleep in their apartment, dreaming of the STEM camp that started next week. Tommy, who believed his dad could fix anything, who looked at Danny like he was a superhero, instead of just a guy who cleaned up other people's messes. So Danny straightened his shoulders and walked toward the billionaire's table, his work boots echoing in the sudden silence. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever had to find courage you didn't know you had. "What's your name?" Hayes asked as Danny approached, his tone more curious than condescending. "Danny Morrison, sir. I'm sorry about the power outage. The building's electrical system is pretty old, and sometimes the load from events like this can overload the main breaker." Hayes studied Danny's face, noting the intelligence behind tired eyes and the careful way he explained technical concepts in simple terms. "You seem to know quite a bit about electrical systems for someone who mops floors." The comment stung, but Danny had developed thick skin over the years. "I do what needs doing, sir. My son and we need the work." Something in the way Danny mentioned his child caught Hayes' attention. The billionaire had built his empire on reading people, on understanding what motivated them beyond money or fame. In Danny's voice, he heard the same fierce protectiveness that had driven Hayes himself to build his first company when his own daughter had been diagnosed with a rare illness that insurance wouldn't cover. "How would you like to do what needs doing somewhere else?" Hayes asked quietly. "I have a facilities management company that oversees electrical systems for commercial buildings throughout the state. We're always looking for people who can think on their feet." The ballroom around them had returned to its elegant buzz of conversation, but Danny felt like he was standing in a vacuum where only Hayes' words could reach him. This couldn't be real. Men like Vincent Hayes didn't notice men like Danny Morrison, let alone offer them opportunities that could change everything. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I don't have any formal training or certifications. I just learned by doing, by necessity." Hayes smiled, and for the first time that evening, it reached his eyes. "Some of the best solutions come from necessity, Mr. Morrison. Tell me, do you have any family?" "A son, Tommy. He's 8. Danny's voice softened the way it always did when he talked about his boy. "He's starting a STEM camp next week. Kid's brilliant, way smarter than his old man." "And what does Tommy want to be when he grows up?" Danny's chest swelled with pride. "An engineer. He wants to build bridges that connect people, help communities that don't have good infrastructure. He's got these dreams that are bigger than anything I could have imagined at his age." Hayes nodded slowly, pieces of a larger picture falling into place in his mind. "Mr. Morrison, I'd like to make you an offer. My company will pay for your electrical certification courses and provide you with a full-time position as a maintenance supervisor. The salary would be 4 times what you're making now, with full benefits and education assistance for your son." The words hit Danny like a physical force, and he had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. 4 times his current salary would mean Tommy could go to any college he wanted. It would mean they could move out of their tiny apartment into a real home. It would mean Danny could finally provide the kind of life Sarah had dreamed of for their family. But years of disappointment had taught Danny to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. What's the catch? "Mr. Hayes, men like you don't usually notice men like me." Hayes leaned back in his chair, studying Danny with renewed interest. The janitor's caution was smart, protective. It spoke to a man who'd learned to guard against false hope. The catch, Mr. Morrison, is that I need someone I can trust to oversee the electrical systems in some very sensitive facilities. Government contracts, medical research centers, places where a power failure could cost lives. I need someone who understands that when the lights go out, finding a solution isn't just a job, it's a responsibility. Danny thought of all the nights he'd stayed late to fix broken heating systems in the community center, knowing that families used the building as a warming shelter during harsh winters. He thought of the time he'd rewired the electrical panel in his apartment building for free because the elderly woman upstairs was afraid to use her oxygen concentrator during storms. He'd never considered these acts of service as qualifications for anything bigger, but maybe Hayes saw something Danny had overlooked. "I'd need to think about it, talk it over with my son," Danny said carefully. "This is his home, his school. I can't just uproot him without making sure it's the right choice." Hayes reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, writing a number on the back. "That's my direct line. Take all the time you need, but know that the offer stands. Sometimes the best opportunities come when we're not looking for them." As Danny walked home that night, the business card felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. He'd spent 3 years walking these same streets after his late shifts, past empty storefronts and broken streetlights that reminded him daily of all the things in the world that needed fixing. But tonight, those same streets looked different. They looked like a place he might actually be able to leave behind. Tommy was still awake when Danny got home, curled up on their second-hand couch with a library book about renewable energy systems. His son's face lit up when Danny walked through the door, the same way it had every night since Sarah died, as if Tommy was afraid his dad might not come back someday. "How was work, Dad? Did anything exciting happen?" Danny sat down beside his son, pulling him close and breathing in the scent of cheap shampoo and childhood dreams. How could he possibly explain what had happened tonight? How could he put into words the moment when his entire future had shifted on its axis? "Something pretty amazing happened, buddy, but I want to hear about your day first. What are you reading?" Tommy held up his book, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "It's about smart grids and how electricity can be distributed more efficiently to help poor communities get reliable power." "Did you know that there are kids all over the world who can't do their homework at night because they don't have lights?" Danny's heart clenched with love and pride. Even at 8 years old, Tommy was already thinking about how to use his future knowledge to help others. Sarah would have been so proud of the compassionate young man their son was becoming. "What if I told you that there might be a way for you to learn even more about those kinds of systems?" Danny said carefully. "What if someone offered Dad a job where he could work with electrical systems in important buildings and maybe help make sure more kids have the power they need?" Tommy's eyes widened. "Someone offered you a job? Like a real job with benefits and everything?" "Yeah, buddy, a real job. It would mean we might have to move to a different part of the city, maybe get a bigger place, and it would mean Dad could afford to send you to better schools, maybe even save up for college." Tommy was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the seriousness of a child who'd learned early that good news often came with complications. "Would you be happy, Dad? Would this job make you happy like Mom used to?" The question hit Danny harder than any offer or opportunity could. Since Sarah's death, he'd been so focused on survival, on just getting through each day, that he'd almost forgotten what happiness felt like. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, he'd felt something that might have been hope. "I think it might, Tommy. I think it really might." Share in the comments if you've ever faced a decision that could change everything for your family. The next morning, Danny called Vincent Hayes' direct line while Tommy was at school, his hands shaking slightly as he dialed the number. The billionaire answered on the second ring, as if he'd been expecting the call. "Mr. Morrison, I was hoping to hear from you. Have you had a chance to think about my offer?" "I have, sir. And if the opportunity is still available, I'd like to accept, but I have one condition." Hayes was quiet for a moment, surprised by the janitor's boldness in negotiating terms. "Go ahead." "Tommy, my son, he's in a good school right now, has friends, stability. If we relocate, I need assurance that he'll have access to the same quality of education, preferably better. His future matters more to me than my own." The sincerity in Danny's voice reminded Hayes of his own priorities when his daughter had been young and vulnerable. Family first, everything else second. It was a philosophy that had guided every major decision in his life, and he respected hearing it echoed back from someone who had so much less but valued the same things. "Mr. Morrison, not only will I ensure Tommy has access to excellent schools, but I'll also establish an educational trust fund that will guarantee his college tuition. Regardless of where he chooses to study, consider it an investment in the next generation of problem solvers." Danny had to sit down as the full weight of Hayes' generosity hit him. This wasn't just a job offer anymore. This was a complete transformation of everything he and Tommy could expect from life. It was the kind of opportunity that came along once in a lifetime, if at all. "Mr. Hayes, why are you doing this? I'm nobody special. I'm just a guy who knows how to fix broken things." Hayes was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of memory and loss. 20 years ago, my daughter Emma was born with a heart condition that required her to be on life support for the first 6 months of her life. One night, during a terrible storm, the hospital's power went out. The backup generators failed, and for 47 minutes, my little girl's life hung in the balance while technicians struggled to restore power. Danny listened in silence, understanding now that this wasn't really about electrical systems at all. A maintenance worker named Carlos Reyes worked for 47 minutes straight in a flooded basement, risking electrocution to manually restart those generators. He saved my daughter's life, and when I tried to thank him, to offer him a reward, he just smiled and said he was doing what needed doing. Emma is now a healthy 20-year-old studying pre-med at Stanford, and Carlos is still working maintenance at that same hospital because he believes his job matters. Hayes paused, letting the story settle between them. "When I saw you walk through that ballroom last night, when I watched you fix what was broken without being asked, without expecting recognition, I saw Carlos. I saw someone who understands that some work is bigger than a paycheck. My daughter is alive today because someone like you was there when she needed him most." Danny wiped his eyes, thinking of Sarah and how she'd always believed that everyone crossed your path for a reason. Maybe this was her way of making sure Tommy would have every opportunity she'd dreamed of for him. "When do I start, Mr. Hayes? How does next Monday sound? I'll have my assistant send you all the details about relocation assistance, certification programs, and school options for Tommy. Welcome to Hayes Industries, Mr. Morrison. I have a feeling this is the beginning of something important." That evening, Danny took Tommy to their favorite diner to celebrate with milkshakes and French fries. As they sat in their familiar booth, sharing this momentous news, Danny watched his son's face light up with excitement about their new adventure. "Dad, does this mean I can still do STEM camp? I already made friends there, and we're working on this project about sustainable energy for rural communities." Danny smiled, realizing that Tommy's priorities remained perfectly aligned with his values. Even faced with the prospect of a completely new life, his son was thinking about his commitments and his desire to help others. "Not only can you finish STEM camp, buddy, but Mr. Hayes said there are programs at your new school that will let you work with real engineers on actual community projects. You might be able to help bring electricity to places that need it, just like you were reading about last night." Tommy's eyes grew wide with wonder and possibility. "Dad, do you think Mom would be proud of us? Do you think she'd be happy about this new job?" Danny reached across the table and took his son's small hand in his own. Work-worn fingers. "Tommy, your mom always said that the best things in life come to people who keep caring about others even when times are tough. She'd be so proud of who you're becoming, and I think she'd say we're exactly where we're supposed to be." As they walked home that night, past the familiar streets that had been their world for so long, Danny felt Sarah's presence in the warm evening air. He'd kept his promise to her to keep their family together and raise Tommy to be kind and smart and brave. And now, thanks to a moment of darkness that had allowed his light to shine, they were stepping into a future brighter than either of them had dared to imagine. The following Monday, Danny Morrison walked into Hayes Industries wearing a new uniform with his name embroidered on the pocket and a sense of purpose that ran deeper than any job description could capture. Vincent Hayes met him personally at the front desk, introducing him to his new team as the Senior Electrical Systems Supervisor, a title that would have seemed impossible just a week ago. Mr. Morrison will be overseeing maintenance for some of our most critical facilities, Hayes announced to the assembled staff. His expertise and dedication will help ensure that when people depend on us to keep the lights on, we never let them down. As Danny shook hands with engineers and technicians who would have never noticed him a week ago, he thought about how Sarah used to say that everyone has a moment when their real life begins. Maybe that moment wasn't when you graduated or got married or had children. Maybe it was when someone saw your worth and gave you the chance to prove it to yourself. 6 months later, Danny was called to emergency repairs at a children's hospital during a severe thunderstorm. As he worked to restore power to the pediatric wing, he thought of Vincent Hayes' daughter Emma and the maintenance worker who'd saved her life 20 years ago. He thought of Tommy, now thriving in his new school's advanced science program and making plans to study engineering at the same university where Emma was preparing for medical school. But mostly, he thought of Sarah and how she'd always believed that broken things could be fixed, that darkness was just the absence of light, and that sometimes the most important moments of your life happen when you're brave enough to step forward when everyone else is standing still. The power came back on just as the storm reached its peak, and as Danny packed up his tools, a young nurse approached him with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "The little girl in room 12, she was so scared in the dark. But when the lights came back on, she said an angel must have been watching over her." Danny smiled, thinking of all the angels who'd been watching over him and Tommy, guiding them from that moment of darkness in a ballroom full of strangers to this moment of light in a hospital full of hope. Would you have had the courage to step forward when opportunity knocked? Let us know in the comments what you would have done in Danny's place. Because sometimes the most extraordinary changes begin with the simplest acts of service, and the brightest futures grow from the willingness to fix what's broken. Slightly raspy, calm yet confident narrator, fast-paced but emotional, no matter how small or invisible you think you are. Family isn't just about blood, it's about the connections we choose to illuminate, the people who see our light even when we can't see it ourselves, and the understanding that everyone deserves a chance to shine. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this, and click on the video on the screen to watch the next one with a twist so powerful you'll never forget it.